Welcome to the Deep Dive. We dig through the noise to pull out the insights you really need. Today, we're tackling something pretty critical for fast-growing companies. Moving past that early chaos. How do you build systems that actually scale? And importantly, systems that last. This isn't just, hoping things work out. It's about being intentional, designing for growth.
Absolutely. It's fascinating, isn't that? Initial scrappiness, the informal chats in the hallway. That works fine at the start, but as you grow, that same approach can actually become, well, pretty toxic. It leads to infighting, inefficiency. It really holds you back. The focus has to shift. It's not just about building a great product anymore. It becomes about building the company that can keep building great products. So, today we're going to unpack some practical advice from leaders who've been there, done that.
Okay, so let's jump in. One of the first things that seems counterintuitive, especially coming from maybe more traditional companies, is this idea about long-term planning. We often think about drilling down into KPIs, right? Setting targets a year, 2 years out. But for early-stage startups, especially in hypergrowth, is that really the best way?
Yeah, that's a great point. The thinking is shifting. Instead of those super rigid, detailed long-term plans, leaders are finding more success with something called management by narrative. So what does that mean? Well, instead of getting lost in the weeds of KPIs for next year, you start with a big, clear story, a thesis for the year. Like, okay, this is the main thing we're setting out to achieve this year. And then you break it down into chapters.
Chapters,
Okay.
like quarterly chapters.
Exactly. Or maybe even shorter for really early stage companies. The detailed planning. That really only focuses on the first 3 months or so, chapter 1. Because, let's be honest, things change so fast. As one expert put it, the final product is uncertain even 3 months out, let alone a year. Trying to implement some super detailed long-range product plan, it's not just impractical, it can actually be harmful. You build the wrong thing.
Right. It locks you in when you need to be flexible. It's like writing the whole movie script before you've even shot scene one. You need an arc, but the details, they evolve.
Precisely. It's about setting that North Star, that main narrative direction.
But how does this narrative approach avoid some of the traps we see with things like, say, OKRs? Sometimes they lead to objectives that sound good but are kind of fuzzy. Or the opposite problem, where teams get so hyper-focused on hitting a specific number that they forget why they're doing it. They stop solving the actual customer problem.
Yeah, that's the balancing act. The narrative isn't meant to be fuzzy. It's about crystallizing the story at the right level. High enough to provide direction and inspiration, but flexible enough to allow teams to adapt to what they're learning from customers, from the market. It's less about rigid goals dictating actions and more about a shared understanding of the mission, empowering teams to figure out the how.
Okay, that makes sense. Flexibility is key. And that need for flexibility, it becomes even more apparent when the team starts growing, right? You can't just keep adding people to the same flat structure. Those growing pains people talk about, they really do start to ripple through the whole organization.
Oh, absolutely. And this leads us straight into organizational design. If you don't design the structure thoughtfully as you scale, you run into some classic painful problems. Think about things like overlapping missions. You might have two different teams who basically think they own the same thing.
Like the Coinbase example, right? A risk team and a data science team both tackling Trod.
Exactly. Instant tension. Or you get conflicting mandates. Maybe engineering is focused on boosting U.S. revenue, but the BD team's main metric is the percentage of international revenue. They're pulling in opposite directions.
Ouch, yeah, you can see how that creates friction.
Huge friction. And then there's the classic resources in the wrong places. Maybe you go all in on hiring for a growth team. But meanwhile, your core users are leaving because the product itself has major gaps you're not fixing. You're overinvested in one area and neglecting another critical one.
So spotting these issues is crucial. The idea of having a single leader, maybe a COO, review goals quarterly, that seems like a really practical way to catch these misalignments before they fester.
It is. And the key, I think, is how you frame that review. It's not about that leader becoming a bottleneck or dictating everything from the top down. It's more about creating a regular ritual of reflection, as one source put it. You need those internal processes to check in on the strategy. Are we still aligned? Are resources pointed at the right things? It's proactive.
So it's less about command and control and more about facilitating that alignment check.
Precisely. It's about ensuring that continued focus during hypergrowth, catching those overlaps or conflicts early. It's a structured pause to reassess and adapt, not just rigidly enforce the original plan.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about those really big bets? The company-changing projects, like launching a major new product line, simple alignment checks might not be enough there. You need really tight coordination, right? Fast communication.
Absolutely. For those massive, complex initiatives, the standard structure often won't cut it. This is where you see the power of temporary, virtual, or matrix teams. You pull together a dedicated group with a clear leader just for that project. As one expert said, trying to tackle a huge problem with just a consultant model dipping in and out, it just doesn't work. You need people from operations, engineering, product, data science, all focused on the same problem from their different angles, but driving towards that common vision.
Like embedding specialists directly into the project team.
Exactly. Someone mentioned data scientists embedding them right within feature teams often works best. Why? Because they become fully immersed. They're part of the group. They understand all the nuances, the moving parts. They feel that collective ownership.
Yeah, that idea of collective ownership seems really powerful. It fights against that us versus them thing you sometimes get between departments. How does that embedded, integrated structure help prevent those breakdowns where, say, engineering optimizes for one thing, but it messes things up for marketing?
It forces a shared understanding. When everyone's in the same virtual room, focused on the same outcome, you can't just optimize for your little piece in isolation. You see immediately how your work impacts others. It breaks down those silos naturally because the goal is shared, not just the function. It makes the success of the whole project the priority, not just hitting your individual team's metrics. That prevents a lot of those downstream problems and delays.
Right, right. So empowering teams, fostering collective ownership. This applies beyond just those huge projects, doesn't it? It changes how you think about planning and prioritizing generally. We've all seen it. The leadership team goes into a room for a week, emerges with the plan, and hands it down. That doesn't always feel great for the teams who have to execute it.
Yeah.
How do you get real buy-in, real accountability?
Yeah, that leaders in a room model,
Yeah.
it often moves as a huge opportunity. The alternative is to actually involve the teams in the planning process, not asking them to set the overall company strategy maybe, but to help shape how you get there. There's a neat framework. Leadership shares the high-level strategy, the what. Then the teams respond with proposed plans, the how. Then leadership integrates those proposals, shares the unified plan back, gets feedback, tweaks,
Yeah.
becomes a conversation.
So leaders are guiding, integrating, but not dictating every detail.
Exactly. One leader put it brilliantly. Their job wasn't making the decision, but clearing the path for a decision, trusting the teams to hash out the details. Often they come up with really smart solutions, and importantly, they own it. They feel good about it.
That focus on the what over the how seems key, but does that ever slow things down? Does it lead to, endless debate when you need to move fast?
It can, if you're not careful. But it's about finding the right balance. Leadership still needs to provide clear direction and make the final calls when necessary. But empowering teams to figure out the how within those boundaries, that usually leads to better outcomes.
Think about product teams defining what their product needs to achieve each quarter to support the overall narrative. That creates engagement, not paralysis.
Okay, this makes a lot of sense. Narrative, structure, team empowerment. Now let's shift to something that often becomes a massive bottleneck: hiring, especially during hypergrowth. Here's a thought experiment for you listening. Picture your current hiring process. Now imagine running it at 10 times the volume. What breaks? Oof. Yeah, that's a scary but necessary question. Because things will break if you haven't built a scalable system. And the key insight here isn't just about finding more people. It's about building a repeatable system that consistently finds the right people for your company. This means getting really clear on the core attributes you need, not just skills, but mindset. Things like intellectual curiosity, no ego, ability to embrace change, whatever matters most for your culture.
And then building a process around identifying those attributes.
Exactly. Formalizing it. Checklists, structured interviews, interviewer training. Treat interviewing like a muscle you need to develop across the organization. And importantly, making it scalable once it actually works. Test it, refine it, then document and scale it.
And what about the candidate experience itself? Making it user-centric, as the sources say. That feels important even for the people you don't hire.
Hugely important. Your reputation as an employer matters, especially when you're growing fast. Recruiting should feel like an act of qualification, not disqualification. Don't make snap judgments off a resume. Don't get intimidated by big-name companies on their CV. Focus on what they can do, what potential they have, how they complement the existing team.
Right, look for the strengths.
Look for the strengths, and even for the no's. Communicate clearly, respectfully. That's part of a scalable professional system. It shows respect and protects your brand for future hiring. Oh, and one more thing on this onboarding. It's not just about company processes. Think about providing real industry-level education, too. Give new hires that broader context. Spark their imagination. It helps them have a bigger impact, faster.
Wow, okay. So putting it all together, this sustainable hypergrowth, it's definitely not an accident. It really is built on consciously designing these systems. The narrative, the organizational structure, how you empower teams, how you scale hiring, it all connects.
It really does. And none of these are set-it-and-forget-it solutions. They're living systems. You need that ongoing reflection and refinement we talked about, that quarterly review, checking for misalignment, making adjustments. It's essential. The goal isn't to be perfect on day one. It's about having the courage to stop just, throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's about being willing to slow down just enough to build the right foundations so you can ultimately speed up sustainably.
Slow down to speed up. I like that.
Yeah.
So here's a final thought for you to take away. If you could look into the future of your own organization, maybe at 10 times its current scale, what's the one process that's maybe informal or a bit chaotic right now that you'd formalize today to prevent the biggest potential breakdown down the road? Something to think about.